And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, State Farm Arena, Atlanta, Georgia. Elite Eight, Michigan State. Get ready to take on the Auburn Tigers. Number 1 seed, number 2 seed. Regional final the way it's been many times in the Izzo career. We get to see it again. Izzo's fired up. Bruce Pearl's fired up. That guy's got a lot of energy. Maybe could have used more of that watching film last night. I don't know. But Michigan State's going to go back, I think, to Zapala starting to line up. I would think that's not been mentioned officially. That's kind of what Pearl's expecting. You had a great story at SpartanMag.com about Michigan State having played small ball the last 3 games. Go check that out at SpartanMag.com. Give us a like here at the channel. Subscribe to this channel. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. $1. You can try it out for a week. You'll like it. If you're watching this, you're a Michigan State fan. You'll love it. It's March Madness. Konyndyk, you got the Tigers and the Spartans tomorrow. How you doing, man? Doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing great, and it was a good story. I will give myself credit for that. But it's a credit to Michigan State for changing personnel, adapting to their opponent. And it's easy to kind of disregard stuff like that. But when you think about it, Michigan State has played 3 straight small opponents, and they've kind of done what they needed to do to get to this point.
And they had the flexibility to do it.
Yeah, they had the flexibility to do it. But Zapawa, it's not easy for a guy, especially when you're a senior. And it might be your last game, and there's nothing you can do about it. But the payoff is that he will play a much bigger role against Auburn, and he has to, because Michigan State needs to match these guys on the glass. And Auburn does a good job rebounding. They've got big personnel, but Michigan State has to play big in this game and match them on the glass for any chance to be advancing on. So, it was the power plays in the last game. Maybe they don't win, but he didn't. He sacrificed, and now he's got a chance to do that. But I'm sure for him, that was kind of like, I'm sure a lot of things went through his head during that game.
And Zapawa, a lot of people have been asking me about this. I thought people just kind of already knew this, but sometimes I don't realize that not everybody's a sports writer covering this team all year. It wasn't that Zapawa was benched. It's that they didn't want Kohler to guard a power forward.
Right.
So Kohler, he had a little trouble with Anzil at the 4 off the dribble against New Mexico. Had a little trouble against Bryant's power forward as well. So they didn't want Kohler to guard a 4. Last night, Mississippi had Brakefield and I've forgotten who they are. Dre Davis at the 4. Guys that can drive you. Dre Davis is 6'6", Brakefield 6'7", can shoot and drive. They didn't want Kohler out there covering that guy. So you brought Cohen Karan to start, and then Kohler becomes the 5. He takes Zapawa's Zapawa's position. It's not that Zapawa was doing anything badly. That was to get Kohler away from that matchup.
Well, and
if Carson Cooper had gotten in foul trouble like he did against New Mexico, then Zapawa would have been right back in there taking Cooper's minutes, and they'd have been okay with that, but it's just a pecking order. But it was a Kohler stretch 4 matchup situation, nothing against Zapawa.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more of a pecking order, too, because of the 5-man that Mississippi has. Malik Dia is a smaller guy, and he's a little bit shiftier and quicker against, like if it was playing New Mexico and it was Cooper in foul trouble, then Zapawa is going to play some big minutes because it's a bigger type guy.
He would have done better against Nelly Joseph than Kohler did.
But against against Ole Miss, if he's out there, and let's say Cooper's not out there, if he's out there against Malik Dia, there could be some issues. Yeah. But there's nothing that he did wrong, and this is just one of those matchup things. I would equate it to, when the Golden State had Zach Pachulia, and he's a big dude, and sometimes he didn't play a lot of minutes against certain teams because the matchups were bad, but he played against bigger centers like a Kevin Love or something like that, and that's basketball's about matchups. The fact that you have a program and a player that's willing in this transactional environment to accept his role and do something better for the team, I think that's the bigger story here, not what he did wrong. And he didn't do anything wrong, but it's a matchup type thing. Tomorrow, that matchup is something that they're going to need him to play big and do a nice job. And I think he's gotten progressively better as the season has gone on. I think his contribution has been more than the stats that he delivers, whether it's I think it's 4 points and 4-something points and rebounds. But what he does is he occupies space and allows a lot of other people to get rebounds. And Michigan State has not been good rebounding in the last 2 games, and it's because of Jackson Kohler hasn't played that many minutes at the 4. And Jackson Kohler is something that Michigan State hasn't had since Joey Hauser, a 4-man that can rebound. And that's really, I think, having a four-man that can rebound like Michigan State's gotten out of Jackson Kohler this year. That's one of the reasons why Michigan State is so much better of a rebounding team. Nothing against Malik Hall when he was at Michigan State as a four, but that was not his strength. And Michigan State's taken a real big step forward because they've gotten better in the front court, have more depth in the front court, and because, to a large degree, Jackson Kohler's had a really good year rebounding the ball.
And also against Bryant, Zapawa started that game, played 3 minutes, didn't play again.
Right.
So essentially the same thing that we saw last night, as we saw in the Bryant game. So Kohler in the locker room today, he's fired up about trying to reestablish himself and this team in terms of rebounding. You know, the focus that he has, he gets all wound up and amped up. They're going against an Auburn team with an excellent front line. Janai Broome, National Player of the Year candidate, has battled some injuries later in the season. Sometimes his field goal touch, gets last night. He does a lot of good things, but the touch it comes and goes a little bit, and he's battled through some injuries. I think ankle and a shoulder and so forth. Cardwell's another good big man. They will start what they call two centers. So going from playing a lot of these teams that don't start true centers, this team is starting two true centers. So Michigan State likely goes back with Zapawa in the starting lineup. Broome, Cardwell, you spoke with Carson Cooper a little bit in the locker room after practice today. What are your thoughts about this whole matchup inside?
It's tough, and Michigan State's done a pretty good job against front courts this year. You think of like a lot of the teams that have had like their reputation have been center based. I think Maryland might be one of the better frames of reference. I like Auburn's front court, their personnel better than Maryland's, but Maryland had Julian Reese, which is a veteran, really good power forward or center. Well, they basically played two centers as well. Derek Queen, those two guys were bigs, and they're very, very good, and they played well together. And I think Auburn's got that same type of dynamic. Obviously the Michigan thing where Michigan State played Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. I think Michigan State's front court, they're just the personnel in general, have been pretty underrated. And I think Michigan State historically under Tom Izzo has done pretty good when they've had, a stable of, bigs that can get the job done and do what they need them to do. In some of these matchups, I think back to 2009 with Connecticut, that Hashim Thabit. I mean, he was a monster, and everyone thought there's no way Michigan State could stop them. I don't know what Auburn's going to do. They've got a really good team, but Michigan State, I think they've shown this year that it can play against bigger teams, and they've done fairly well, better than I would expect them to, better than most teams have done against these kind of guys. But Auburn's got a lot of athleticism, a lot of horsepower, so they're a different type of challenge. But I do think that Michigan State's going to be excited to play a bigger lineup after playing small. It's going to be more kind of in their wheelhouse. And I know just talking to Zapawa today, he's really excited about it. He's eager to get out there, and he was joking that, he just took a day off last night. So I really like that kid, and I like that team. And when you have individual examples of self-sacrifice, I think that really kind of that goes a long way with your teammates. Like when a guy's willing to do that. And Jackson Kohler said it kind of best. He's like, man, I can't think of a lot of – he didn't come out and say names, but I think in his head he's rolling through the guys on the roster, probably including himself, like how he would feel if he was asked to do that. But it's kind of rare. And, I think it brings the team together. And I think it's also good for the future because a guy like McCulloch, he's playing Janai Broome, and that's kind of fun for him. And those scout team guys are getting, this is one of the things about this. Michigan State's had a good scout team this year, but this is the time of year where that scout team they can really mirror and can really dig deep, and they can also develop their skill set. And Jackson Kohler was talking about the value of the scout team and what they've done in preparing for it. And Jesse McCulloch was kind of excited about playing this part, but also giving Michigan State a test that's going to help prepare him for this game. And he feels like mirroring these top guys has actually helped him kind of expand his own game. So
Sure.
It's a win for everybody.
And that's sometimes we couldn't see practice today, but there have been times in the past when we've been able to watch practice, and you'll see a scout team player or a red-shirting player like McCulloch who's impersonating another guy, and they just have the green light to just go crazy, and it's fun to watch them expand a little bit. I suspect that Kurtang might have been playing Pettiford in practice today, which is good for him to just let it fly, because Pettiford went wild against Michigan for a short period of time. Freshman, he's that small forward. When he gets into his groove, it's hard to shut his water off. Reminds me of Jordan Crawford a little bit because he'll take some wacky shots, but he can get it to go, and he's got a great handle, and just can do some awkward things. I was talking to John Borovich about it, Michigan State assistant coach. He had the scout for this game, and he says Auburn, they take a lot of kind of like indefensible shots almost. They, like Izzo said, they'll shoot it from the logo, they'll shoot it from the hash mark. You got to get out on them, but sometimes there's some shots that don't make a lot of sense, and they're going up. And when they get rolling, they're going in. And Petford's a guy that can get that playground thing going a little bit like Tanjay, not as physical as Tanjay, but Michigan State was somewhat happy with the shots they made Tanjay take for Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament. Tip your cap if you can make those shots. Over the course of time, you play the percentages, you play your defense, you rebound, and you see what happens. But the indefensible nature of some of the things that they do makes it a little bit of a crapshoot. Last night against Michigan, I think we talked about it on the VCast last night, they blew 5 or 6 transition plays. Very loose, very casual. They were able to fritter away several possessions and not have it hurt them. This game, if Michigan State is playing well and Michigan State finds their B-plus game, their A-minus game, which I'm not sure they've played an A-minus game this year. If Michigan State finds it in this game, if they shoot over 40% from 3, if they turn it over fewer than 11 times, if Jaden Hakins is hitting, all those things coming together, then Auburn's not going to be able to afford frittering away possessions like they did last night if Michigan State's playing well.
Yeah, I just think, it's funny because Michigan State played a team last night that would, going back to what Jeremy Fears called it, took the dare shots. And I think, I feel like the guards from Ole Miss, I mean, those guys were veteran dudes, and I don't think they took bad shots within their scheme. I just don't think that against the Michigan State defense, which is, has been, especially in the Big Ten play, from conference play forward, as these guys have kind of really developed, has been as good a three-point shooting defense in the country. And you talk about John Tanjay in the Big Ten tournament. I want to talk about what Michigan State did to John Tanjay at Michigan State, because I think the Big Ten tournament wasn't a great, example of what Michigan State can do in defense, because they were playing a Wisconsin after playing Oregon, and Oregon, Aikens played against TJ Bamba, who's really physical, wears on you, takes a lot of effort, and it was a one-day, next day turnaround.
No day prep.
Yeah, no day prep. So it's a lot different than cycling up and kind of like regrouping mentally and playing a game like this. I think Michigan State's going to be really into it defensively. And the downside, if you're Auburn, if you're not making those dare shots and you're getting long or you hitting front irons and it's going out to the elbow and Jeremy Fears gets it or something like that, then you're almost igniting Michigan State's break. And I think that's going to be something that's really important for this game. Michigan State got next to nothing in transition buckets last night, and that's one of the reasons why Michigan State shot as well as they did, did as well as they did on defense, but didn't pull away. They couldn't get those fast break buckets. The way Auburn plays, and the way Auburn plays, I can't imagine Michigan State not getting more in transition. I'll even go back to like Bruce Pearl's Tennessee teams. Those are physical, tough teams. Michigan State was still able to get some transition production against those teams, and that's going to be a big part of it.
Remind me about transition. I'll get back to that point in a minute. But first of all, as you know, Michigan's recycling rate. Now we got that message from Shupan, I promised last night. We love Shupan. Michigan State's
aluminum.
Yes, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% before COVID to about 73% since COVID. And Michiganders are squandering $105 million per year by not taking back their bottles and cans. That's hurting our environment, ladies and gentlemen. So help the environment, help yourself, help your beaches, help your lakes, help your roads. Take them back. Take them back. Take those bottles and cans back. A message from Shupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. What were we talking about? Transition game?
Beaches.
Oh,
yeah, transition.
Michigan State against teams like this that are willing to run with them, will we see Michigan State run for 40 minutes? Or will we see what they used to do maybe with North Carolina, like run, and then sometimes Izzo will hold them up. Then they'll get going, then he'll hold them up. Last night we saw Auburn and Michigan do a lot of racehorse, and it was sloppy. Both teams are fumbling it all over the place. And, Dusty May said, hey, we, during the in-game interview, he said we have a lot of guys on both sides doing more one-on-one stuff than probably the coaches wanted. I'm not sure if Bruce Pearl agreed with that. But it got really sloppy and ugly. I'm not sure Michigan State wants to racehorse it that much to the point where it's sloppy. Racehorse and not turn it over. That's the key. I talked to Tom Crean. He's a color commentator for Westwood One here, former Michigan State assistant coach, and I just asked him, what he thought, and he said, it's about the pace. It's about the pace up and down and who can avoid turnovers. So that's the whole thing. So is Michigan State full blast, or is it bridled a little bit? That's being discussed, and it's been discussed. We don't know what it is till we see it, but Michigan State in spurts will be happy to run with Auburn.
I think it's going to come down to whether Auburn's getting back or not. Michigan State's their fast break is fast, but it's not reckless. They've got a system and they run it well. I think if you're Michigan and you're Auburn playing Michigan, that plays right into Auburn's hands because they're better athletes, they have better depth, and Michigan is not equipped at the guard position, to do that, and they don't have the guards with the fast break IQ that you need. And you could see that in the box score. The guards did not produce very much at all. And I think Michigan's wearing themselves out. And what happened to Michigan last night, and I know everyone's making a big deal, like Auburn fans, they got another 22-2 run or whatever. They're doing that to everybody. But what happened to Michigan is the same thing that happened to Michigan against Michigan State twice, and where Michigan State was able to pull away and use their athleticism and do that. I don't think there's a team that Michigan State has played this year because of Michigan State's guard depth, because of their depth in general, where you saw the Spartans at a risk of really wearing down. Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament, maybe, because it was just a no-day prep. But I don't think Michigan State, they're going to want to run, but I don't think they're going to get it's not going to get haphazard and out of control because Michigan State runs. That's what they do. It's not like they're trying to reinvent the wheel. They're trying to just be a better version of themselves, and I think that's a big deal. But you can't, against a team like Auburn that has athleticism and length, you can't take risks. You can't try to take throw fade passes to the corner of the end zone. You're going to get things deflected away and whatnot, but Michigan State, they've got to be smart about it. And I think they look forward to getting out and running a little bit. This game should be refreshing in some ways after what was nothing short of a rock fight last night. And for everyone in the stands here, everyone that watched it at home, everyone that sent me text messages, there's a lot of anxiety out there. This will be a different type of game. Auburn's a great team. I think what Michigan State has to avoid is if Auburn hits some crazy shots, then you can't get into a deal where you're falling into that same rut and not running your offense. And I felt like Michigan got, in watching that last night, they kind of fell into the trap that Auburn sets. When that run set in, they started panicking and took some bad shots, turned the ball over. Michigan's been a team that turns the ball over this year, but I think Michigan State is quietly really kind of cut down on turnovers despite playing against really good defenses, and they need to continue to do that, especially that they've got to avoid the live ball turnovers, at all costs. Well, this should be this should be a really interesting game. I'm going to be interested to see where Michigan State is at in terms of their prep for Auburn, because we talk about Michigan State's transition system. They have a prep for winning the weekend, and I feel like the structure of Michigan State's operation is better than the structure of Auburn's operation, unless Bruce Pearl is the best poker player in the world, and the players are just, they're just like, being sneaky, and that's not the case. I feel like we've seen this play out so many times in covering, tournaments at this stage. Michigan State always has an advantage in prep. The first game, is sometimes harder. Sometimes they don't get to the second game. But once they get to the second game, they have an edge that the other team doesn't have. Is that enough to overcome the talent that Auburn has? I don't know. But I do feel like Michigan State will be prepared for this game and should have confidence as a result of that.
Sure. He's talking about Bruce Pearl last night saying he was going to go home and have a drink and not watch any Michigan State tape and wait until he gets up in the morning and gets after it. Today at the press conference, Pearl said he'd only been through three Michigan State games. Izzo watched Auburn live here, of course, last night, and you can bet Izzo, as he does, was up all night cramming, and there was a lot of previous work done before they got here. Doug Wojcik had the Michigan prep, and they had a lot of stuff on Michigan. They played him a couple times. Borovich has the Auburn prep, and that started earlier in the week, and they get some of that stuff done even before they play Mississippi, win or lose. So Michigan State's going to be more prepared. They just are. That doesn't mean they're going to win. It reminds me of some of those games they played against Roy Williams when North Carolina's team seemed so casual about not knowing a whole lot about Michigan State. Like, I remember going to these press conferences on the day between games, and North Carolina players saying we haven't really seen any Michigan State film yet. And the one time we were in Winston-Salem, I think that was the case, and North Carolina was just had edges and personnel all over the place and was able to get by with that. But Michigan State, Tom Izzo, he's got a record in the Elite Eight, 8-2 or whatever it is. His record on one-day preps in the NCAA Tournament for good reason. I don't know what his record is against number one seeds. It's hard to beat number one seeds in this thing, but Auburn's got they've got a live one tomorrow in Michigan State coming in, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The transition game, Michigan State. You get in transition, you get some 3-pointers. You need Akins and Richardson to be hot. That's what you have to be to move on. You need them to be maybe even beyond hot, like we saw Travis Trice a couple of times against Virginia when they come out against a really good team, and you ride a wave, and those are the teams that move on.
Yeah, I don't know. Like this. We
remember when Trice did that against Virginia?
I remember that, but this is a better team. Michigan State might not advance. And Tom Izzo said this as much, like not about this specific team, but he talked about in generalities about teams that he's had. Talk about some of his best teams, like some that he thought were Final Four teams or should be Final Four teams or could have won a national championship, didn't get out of the first weekend. And you do have to be hot, but I do feel like Michigan State is better than that. This Michigan State team is in a lot of ways is better than that Travis Trice team. They've got more depth, more pieces, and when Michigan State's
was that the Trice Valentine team that went to the Final Four?
Yeah,
Costello,
with Bryn Forbes and stuff like that, and they didn't have a lot of depth, and Alvin Ellis played some minutes in that game as well, and it takes a lot to get to this point. I just feel like Michigan State. You talked about the North Carolina game in Winston-Salem too. Michigan State had a puncher's chance in that game, I felt, because
Neitzel's junior year,
right? But they weren't as good as this team was,
right? Michigan State was a 9 seed.
They didn't have the depth. I understand, that the only similarity between that game and this is the quality of opponent in terms of a big name brand name opponent, and the fact that there's going to be a lot of Auburn fans in the stands in this game. I think
Carolina was the number one seed, Auburn's the number one seed, home court advantage, and some cavalier, laissez-faire attitudes.
But I think I think the real comparable is when Michigan State played in 2009 against Louisville in Indianapolis. There was a ton of Louisville fans. The team was casual in everything that they did. There was a lot of Louisville was. Michigan State was locked in, laser focused, and they had a chip on their shoulder. They wanted to get to somewhere special. They wanted to prove themselves, and they didn't care. They didn't care who they were playing. And I think when you look at the attitude of this Michigan State team. That team had a mixture. That team back in 2009 had a mixture of old guys and young guys, and they played well together. And maybe they didn't have the chemistry that this team has, but when it came tournament time, they started really kind of pulling together. And in Louisville, they thought they were going to cakewalk their way to the Final Four. Michigan State punched them in the mouth and kept on punching, and that game was close at times, but I honestly, looking back at that, I can't remember a time where I didn't feel confident during that game that Michigan State, wasn't going to win. I don't know how it exactly played out because everything kind of washes together when you're old like me, but
Corey Lucius came in as a freshman, played some important minutes at the end of the first half because of foul trouble, might have hit a shot or two.
Yeah, but Travis Walton, he played great defense, and
Suton had a big game.
And it's going to take, a kind of like laser focus on Michigan State's part. It's going to take really good guard defense, guys making plays.
Backcourt defense.
And Michigan State's been really good defensively at the guard position, and it's not like you're asking Michigan State to do something they haven't done before. We've seen guys hit some shots, and Jason Richardson, you expect him to be. He's gotten to the point where I expect him to have a big game. And Jaden Akins, we can talk about him hitting shots or not, but lately he's been good for one or two big shots. He's been good at driving to the basket. Holloman, he's kind of due for one of those a bunch of threes type of game. But it's going to be a really interesting game because you cannot take Michigan State lightly. This is a really good Michigan State team, and I know. Bruce Pearl with his little SEC chants. That's all great and stuff like that, and it's cute. But Tom Izzo is 10-0 lifetime against the SEC, and I'm not saying that that's going to push them over the top, but you don't want to mess with Tom Izzo in the tournament. Michigan State's going to be as prepared as anybody that they face. And Michigan State's players, are going to have that laser focus and hunger because they're happy to be playing to get to the Final Four, but those guys want to get there and they want to do it for the coach. And there's a lot of willpower on this team.
Izzo's 10-0 against the SEC. I think 8-2 in regional finals. I wasn't there for the press conference. We were in the locker room. But how come no one asks them questions? I don't think anyone asks them questions about that. But when they play North Carolina, it's like, how come you're 2-10 against North Carolina? How come you're 1-9 against Duke?
I don't. If you're Tom Izzo, do you really want that question asked? Do you want that to be a talking point for Bruce Pearl and his team? I don't.
I think he since he gets the other ones, he wouldn't mind the positive ones.
Well, he hasn't gotten too many of those other ones.
Last year when they lost to Duke in the Champions Classic, he was asked, why are you 1-2 10 against Duke? It's like most teams are 2-10 against Duke.
Yeah, but that was last year. This year, Michigan State. You could ask the same thing about Northwestern. Why have you lost so many in a row to Northwestern? Or at Michigan State hasn't really put themselves in a situation where those questions are coming up this year. And
10-0 is pretty noteworthy.
Yeah, it is.
8-2 in the regional finals is pretty noteworthy.
It's pretty noteworthy, but they've got a big task at hand, and I don't think that's something that Izzo probably wouldn't want to ask, to be honest with you. It's better to be written after the fact than end up being 10-1.
Now the backcourt defense last night pretty good. Padula got off a few times. I thought they kept Murray under wraps a little bit. Michigan State's backcourt believes in themselves as they should, to the point where they've even said we think we're the best all-around backcourt in the country. This is a game in which they'll have a chance to prove that. Denver Jones came out last night. He was averaging 11 points a game. He shoots 42% from three, and he scored 20 last night. And he plays really good defense. Something about Auburn, they will play some pressure defense also. Denver Jones, like Pearl mentioned, is one of the top 10 finalists for the Naismith Defensive National Player of the Year award. So Denver Jones will be getting into maybe Richardson, I'm not sure. Auburn also, as a program, does a really good job of denying inbound plays. It's something that's just one of Pearl's things. Baseline inbounds, sideline inbounds. It's hard to get the ball inbounds against them. They create turnovers on those little things to try to steal possessions, and they make you spend a little more time on that in practice. But the defense for Auburn is going to be pretty good. Also, we'll see whether it stays that way with the up and down, and the way Michigan State can spread it around. But Auburn can really spread it around. When you have Jones and Miles Kelly, who last night was 1 out of 7 from 3, but on a given night he can just as easily go 6 out of 7 from 3, and that's the danger you get when you're playing Auburn. And last night Pettiford, goes wild with some in-between shots, 7 out of 14 from the field, but he was 2 out of 7 from 3. He can do better than that from 3. He was the whole team was 8 out of 28, but the backcourt, Akins, I assume Akins is going to begin guarding Chad Baker-Mazzara, who's about 6'7", 12 points a game. He was 2 of 9 last night. He's a 37% three-point shooter, so Akins will be giving up some height to him. So when he's on the court with Pettiford, I think Richardson probably takes Pettiford, two of the best freshmen in the NCAA tournament or in the whole country this year, and that's an interesting matchup. But all the way across the board, you got Holloman mixing in there. You got, of course, Fears taking on the head of the snake. These are two excellent backcourts, and if Auburn... you can play well against Auburn for a number of minutes, but then all of a sudden they get hot in a 5-minute period and start hitting some shots from the hash mark, and it all kind of goes away. But if Michigan State is successful in holding Auburn below their averages and below their percentages, that's a big step toward making this happen. And I'm sure Auburn is confident, but I think they're going to see a pretty good defensive matchup for Michigan State.
Yeah, and if you're Michigan State, you can't play Auburn's game. You have to run your stuff and do your thing. And I just feel like you can't, if Auburn's taking bad shots or getting sloppy in transition, you can't throw away possessions because they are. I think that's a big deal. And if a guy's missing, you can't back off him and hope that he keeps on missing or sag off in any manner. You can't.
Last night they let Konyndyk take that shot.
Yeah.
They let him take that shot. I just have a hard time just understanding the philosophy of why give anyone an open shot.
Yeah, unless there's a couple guys that I would do it. If I was playing
Doug Gottlieb.
If I was playing Michigan, and I'd do what every other team did, against Roddy Gale. If a guy's shooting 15% from 3. And he's more of a danger, actually, slashing to the basket, but he doesn't know it.
Yeah.
I'm letting him shoot that. I'm letting him shoot that shot. But there's no reason why I'm not. That's one of the things I like about Michigan State's defense. They rarely like completely concede something.
Yeah,
they
why
might put more emphasis on this guy, and it might be a tougher closeout to get to a guy that's lesser on the scouting report. But they're not going to completely let him dismantle them and just say, hey, that's the odds. It doesn't work like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why Michigan State has been really good as a three-point shooting defense, because there hasn't been anyone that they've left really, really wide open. I just kind of wonder, too, like, Michigan State's played some really good teams. I wonder if a team like Maryland's not a good frame of reference for what these guys can do. I know Auburn's got more depth. I do think that they play a different style of game than Maryland does, but Maryland's the one kind of comparable where everybody on the floor was a threat, and
they would shoot from deep,
and like they would shoot from deep, and I think Michigan State did a really good job of shutting off their water, their primary guys, but also like their other wings, and maybe I don't know, Florida's probably, I don't know who in the SEC is the closest comparable to Michigan State, but I would say Florida is. I do think Michigan State's guards defend better than Florida's overall, but I don't think Auburn's guys have had they haven't played a team that's as sound defensively.
Like Tennessee.
Yeah, maybe Tennessee, but I don't think that they've played many teams that are as sound defensively as Michigan State is. So if they're looking at
playing a conventional style, I mean Mississippi is, but it's different. It's
right.
a different
And
style.
if they're looking at what they did against Michigan and saying, hey, they're the Big Ten champs because of what they did in the Big Ten tournament. I know Bruce Pearl has said, hey, Michigan's not the real Big Ten champs. Michigan State is, but that's easier to say publicly than to get that across to your team. And you talked about their freshmen and Michigan State's freshman. Michigan State's freshman doesn't act like a freshman, and Auburn's does. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad type of thing, but the maturity level that Michigan State has, I felt like facing a team like Ole Miss, that was a really tough test, and that they answered that. I think Michigan State needed to face defense like that. They needed to see all those kind of contested shots that they haven't seen this year. And I think Michigan State's pretty well prepared for this. Does that maturity get them through? I don't know. I mean, I think that Michigan State's got depth. Auburn plays a lot of guys too. So it's going to be a really interesting game. It's not going to be like one of those deals where I don't think Michigan State's going to wear down like Michigan and other teams that have played Auburn. At the same time, I don't see Michigan State pulling away just because they have the strength in numbers. It's going to be a deal where everybody has to execute. They have to do it at a high level. You got to hit your free throws again. You can't. Last night there was a couple times where shots you like to see go in that were blocked, those type of things. You got to try to get as many of those layups, even though they're harder against teams that contest. But you got to make some of those, and I think it's going to be a really good game.
The further you go in the tournament, the more you're going to see capable athletes that are tied together that are going to come across and rim protect from the weak side and block your shots. Michigan State saw that last night, and tonight against Auburn, or on Sunday against Auburn. There'll be some things they've not seen. There'll be some foreign things that you have to adapt to while the game is going on. Hey, Auburn out-rebounded Michigan by 15. Michigan at times was a good rebounding team. Michigan struggled against Michigan State when it comes to rebounding, but Broome had 16 rebounds. So Michigan State getting out-rebounded by Mississippi. Izzo said, we were not the tougher team. You know that Izzo's going to be prodding his guys to show they're the tougher team in this one, but Auburn's going to be doing the same thing. How that all shakes out, now that Zapala's back in the rotation, Michigan State will have more size out there, which takes up more space, and defensive rebounding should be okay for Michigan State, I would think. But that, talking to Borovich, that's something that they really want to stamp out. If Pettiford's hitting some crazy shots, tip your cap. If they get hot, they're going to play their percentages and play their gaps and do their things, but they cannot allow loose ball rebound putbacks. Last night Mississippi had 12, 13 offensive rebounds, those things, and of course the turnovers or baseline inbound plays for scores. The little things. Izzo talked about that today. They always emphasize those, but in this game, in this situation where the margins are so slim in the Elite Eight. Those are the things Michigan State does not want to get beat by, but the rebounding thing is going to be interesting, Paul.
Yeah, guards have got to do their part. I mean, Jace Richardson had a lot of rebounds last night.
2 defensive rebounds
he had 6.
last night in the last 3 minutes that were massive. Richardson.
But I mean, guard rebounding is big. You talk about whenever you got good front court personnel rebounding, you've got to have guards. When Michigan State, when they played Illinois, when Illinois was the top dog rebounding wise, I mean the emphasis is cut out and guards come in there and swoop in. Akins has shown that he can do it. That's a big deal. Richardson's getting better at rebounding. Frankie Fiddler and Cohen Carr. I mean, Cohen Carr has a chance. every time he comes out there, you think that maybe he's going to have 10 rebounds.
And last night he got beat on 2 offensive rebounds last night.
But,
he knew it.
But here's the deal, and I said this to you last night. That's a guy that played 32 minutes for the first time in a starting role. I mean, the emotional wear and tear. It's a lot different when you're coming off the bench and you're playing 20 minutes and you can use all that horsepower. He's a guy that played a lot of minutes last night in an 8-man rotation. And the other thing is he hasn't done that before. So it's the thing that I said to you is a lot of these guys in Michigan State's roster, like whether it's Jaden Akins or Trey Holloman, they played games where they played 30-plus minutes. Well, a guy like Konyndyk, going back to last year when he was a true freshman, he never had a game like that. So until you do that and you experience that and you kind of can do it on a consistent basis and learn how to dig into that reserve and find a way to get stuff done, it's easier said than done. Mental fatigue is a big deal when you're not used to playing those kind of minutes. And I think that's going to be a big deal for Michigan State to keep guys fresh. You don't want a lot of guys playing over 30 minutes in this game.
Right. And
you can help it.
And the freshness factor will not be in Michigan State's favor. Auburn comfortably goes deep. They went a little shorter last night, and Bruce Pearl thought that fatigue was a factor against Michigan last night. Like you said, Auburn, it's a strength for them. It's a strength for Michigan State. It'll come down to other factors. Anything else, Paul?
No.
All right, on Sunday, someone's going to be cutting down that net down there. We've seen Michigan State with Tom Izzo do it, 8 times? Going for 9 on Saturday. It's entirely possible. It's exciting. The way they've built this team to be on the cusp of this. When coming into the season, no one really gave him a chance, much just finishing the top 3 in the Big Ten. We didn't know Jace Richardson was going to be this good. We didn't know Jackson Kohler would be this good of a rebounder. We didn't know Jeremy Fears would be healthy to do the things he's doing, moving and jumping, and the steal he had last night, and the way Konyndyk come along. All those things have been wonderful for Michigan State. Trey Holloman's really come along. Now they've all got to do it on the same night, Paul. And if they do, they're going to go to another Final Four. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but they got a shot. Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from Atlanta, Georgia with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.